The brain radio. After 3 years studying telepathy, engineer Bernard Bernardovich Kaczynski joined the lab of Russia's most famous circus animal trainer, Vladimir L. Durov, in 1922. Kaczynski was assigned to a team tasked with studying Durov's ability to communicate with the circus animals. People claimed that the circus master had a unique gift for making the creatures obey his commands without hesitation. Durov claimed he discovered his gift as a young boy. When faced with a violent dog that threatened to kill him, Durov bravely stared into the creature's eyes, and just before the dog was about to strike, he compelled the animal to back away. The dog stopped barking and then gently approached him in submission, as if Durov was his master. Kaczynski was deeply interested in this topic, as he had dedicated years of study to radio research. He thought that Durov's gift was related to biological radio communications, which held the secrets of telepathic powers between animals and humans. Under the Soviet government, Durov had established a center for studying animal psychology. With Kaczynski's support, he planned to take the experiments one step further. Together, they performed more than 1,270 experiments on telepathic dog training in the course of almost 3 years. More than 700 were successful. The rest were not. Kaczynski claimed to have developed a device that could transmit brain impulses and transform them into long-distance signals. Called the brain radio, it relied on Kaczynski's controversial hypothesis that brains can emit cerebral radiation and that such signals can be perceived and understood by others in what would essentially be a form of telepathy. Kaczynski would write later in his book, Biological Radio Communications, quote, "I had to find in the human organism the elements that were structurally and functionally similar to the basic components of a transmitting and receiving radio station. I had to make a thorough study of the nervous system." The first tests consisted of using low-frequency radio waves to tell a dog to retrieve a telephone book from another room. Dogs obeyed the circus master hastily. To test his telepathy theory, Kaczynski built a Faraday cage that interrupted the transmission of electrical signals. He put Durov inside and told him to communicate with the dogs, but none obeyed. In his book, Kaczynski concluded, quote, "When the cage door was closed, V.L. Durov sitting inside was unable to transmit to the test animal outside, the dog Mars, a mental assignment. But as soon as the door was opened, Mars carried out every order with precision." On one occasion, Kaczynski told Durov to experiment with him. Sitting apart from each other, Durov wrote on a piece of paper what he would command him to do. Both men locked eyes, and suddenly, Kaczynski rose one of his hands to scratch one of his ears. Durov then handed him the paper, which read, quote, "Scratch behind your right ear." The experiment's success earned the attention of the Soviet military. Their findings could be potentially used as a psychological weapon against humans. A lack of progress in the brain radio's human trials, however, led the military to shut the program down some years later. It is said that Stalin and other Soviet officials were fearful that one of their bodyguards could be brainwashed to kill them when they least expected, which led to the project's cancellation. Nevertheless, the advancements made by Kaczynski would inspire the Nazis to perform similar tests with an electric shock machine called Elka, created to make the perfect and most obedient soldier. During the Cold War, the US and the modernized USSR would try to use similar approaches to brainwashing spies into carrying high-value target assassinations as part of the CIA's and KGB's infiltration programs. None of them succeeded. Or at least, that's what has been told. The combat mole. In the 1930s, the Soviet Union funded the development of a combat mole prototype. This complex and powerful drilling machine would be used to burrow underground to breach enemy lines and destroy highly fortified underground infrastructure. The combat mole was first designed by the Russian Pyotr Rasskazov in 1904. His design would be used to fight the Great War's trench stalemates, but the Russian retreat in 1918 to fight the Reds in the Civil War left the idea in the past. In the 1960s, during the Cold War and the arms race, a new top-secret project was launched to produce a next-generation subterranean weapon. This project, actively supported by the Soviet leader himself, Nikita Khrushchev, was even more secret than the Russian ICBM program. In 1964, the first Russian subterrene was unveiled at a facility in Ukraine. It was baptized the Battle Mole. At 115 feet long, the nuclear-powered capsule carried up to 20 soldiers at a time and had a top speed of 4.4 miles per hour. These colossal underground vehicles would be carried to the US on submarines for an invasion. Once there, they would drill on California's coasts to install nuclear charges that would provoke earthquakes and tsunamis. Keeping in mind the existence of the San Andreas Fault, the Soviets knew the mole would maximize the path of destruction. The first test of the mole seamlessly cut through a mountainside like a knife through butter, destroying an empty test bunker. However, the second test failed spectacularly when it exploded with its crew still on board during an exercise in the Ural Mountains. After the failed test, the project was abandoned for other priorities Comrade Stalin had in mind. Weaponized Climate. As the Cold War escalated, both the US and USSR became fascinated by the idea that humans could influence climate and instigate significant weather events, which could deliver staggering military advantages over an enemy in combat. Even after the UN adopted its 1977 treaty prohibiting the military use of environmental modification techniques, the Soviet Union doubled down in 1981 by commissioning the Sura ionospheric heating facility, also known simply as Sura. Located in Veselsorsk, near Novgorod, many believe Sura is a weather weapons development facility disguised as an unthreatening ionospheric research center. Sura can emit up to 190 megawatts of effective radiated power via its 3 broadcasting transmitters and 144 antennas on site. The facility has helped scientists understand ionospheric currents and behaviors. It has also deepened the knowledge of how humans may influence them. Although considerable resources have been devoted to the endeavor over the years, there's little evidence that the Soviet Union or Russia have ever been able to successfully influence the weather in any significant way. However, American scientists have said that just like the US High-Frequency Active Auroral Research Program, Sura can cause seismic movements in non-seismic areas, but weather manipulation seems a little bit far from happening. Some meteorologists have gone as far as to blame the Russians for provoking Hurricane Katrina, which devastated New Orleans in 2005. But Nikolai Snagirev, director of the Research Institute of Radiophysics, disagrees, quote, "Neither the Russians nor the Americans are capable at the time of creating something like Hurricanes Katrina or Rita. It seems that modern technology still has to evolve to one day manipulate weather like the gods of ancient civilizations." The Soviet Ape Man. In 1926, Soviet artificial insemination pioneer Ilya Ivanov set sail to Guinea, French West Africa. His goal was to collect apes as part of his controversial experiments to create a new hybrid animal that was half human, half ape. His continuous successes at crossing various species and creating hybrid animals grabbed the attention of the Soviet regime. His controversial project earned the communist researcher his nickname Red Frankenstein. Ivanov was fully funded by the Bolshevik government, something unusual for the time, as Russia isolated itself from the world to consolidate the new national identity. Historians point out that the government let Ivanov leave the country for his experiments because they wanted to breed and train the strong, hairy apes into a powerful mutant army. Soviet leadership was also interested in how artificial insemination could be used in positive eugenics to breed a more compliant, cooperative, and submissive citizenry. Future Soviet dictator Joseph Stalin encouraged both ideas. After the hecatomb of the Great War and the Russian Revolution, the Soviet armies were depleted. Stalin was interested in breeding a new type of soldier that was, quote, resistant to pain and indifferent to the food they eat. Additionally, both Ivanov and Stalin saw the experiment as a way to prove that God's creation was nothing more than a mere fantasy. If he succeeded, the Soviet regime could officially say that there was no God and that Darwin's theory of evolution was correct. Ivanov's first attempt at inseminating a female chimp with human sperm failed. Thus, he solicited female human volunteers to be inseminated by ape sperm. Although 5 women came forward, the insemination never occurred because the only adult male ape suffered a fatal brain hemorrhage. The project was an utter failure. Stalin, feeling betrayed, exiled Ivanov to Kazakhstan in 1930 during a Soviet purge of scientists. Information regarding the grotesque experiments was declassified in the 1990s after the dissolution of the USSR. The Soviet Spruce Goose. As seen in this US reconnaissance satellite image, the Akronoplan was an experimental Soviet ground effect vehicle that could sustain flight over long distances, most often overseas, and typically flying no higher than 16 feet. The brainchild of engineer Rostislav Alexeyev, the Soviet Central Hydrofoil Design Bureau produced a single Akronoplan unit in 1987. It would remain in active service in the Army and Navy for over a decade before retiring to a Russian naval station. Nicknamed the Caspian Sea Monster by US forces, 8 turbofans powered the massive 550-ton aircraft in excess of 350 miles per hour. The MD-160 seaplane was an efficient way to transport cargo of up to 137 tons, including 6 armed nuclear missiles at a time. But its size and lack of maneuverability made it a potentially easy target for Western fighter jets, limiting its use. NATO forces called it the Duck for a reason. Nonetheless, the MC-160 was armed to the teeth, equipped with anti-ship guided missiles mounted into its fuselage and a pair of 23mm cannons in the tail and the front of the aircraft. A second Ukraine plant designed to be a mobile hospital was 90% complete when the project was abandoned after the USSR's fall. The duck can still be seen at the naval station in Creepiest, Russia.